Okay, y'all, welcome back to the sixth episode of Becoming No One. I'm your host, Big Taj, and today we're going to talk about the seven densities, hit a little bit on the chakra system, but I'm excited to get started. So first and foremost, y'all know I always got to start by shouting y'all out. I appreciate y'all so much because last week I was so sick that I was not even able to post anything to let y'all know, like, hey, the podcast episode dropped, go watch it. And y'all was still on top of it. So shout out to y'all. Shout out to my set. I appreciate y'all so much. And just know too that when I'm doing these episodes, y'all, I'm actually studying throughout the week so that I can make sure the information is accurate. However, I'm learning with y'all. So it's a each one teach one type of moment. So if y'all have any feedback, any criticism, please, reach out to me. A lot of people have been reaching out to me with their questions as well. And I do try to answer every single one that I get. So if you do have questions after listening to an episode, please reach out to me. I will respond to y'all. Also, there's not going to be like a big history portion on this or a history portion at all on this because the only thing that Ross said when he went in the 1980s and not went, but when he was being channeled in the 1980s by these three channelers was that he did go to ancient Egypt and he built healing centers, which were the pyramids. And he also taught them about tarot, how to use crystals. And he also taught them about their seven chakras. However, he noticed that the information was distorted. So he waited several years later, hundreds of years later, to visit this group of channelers when he thought that we would be more able to digest the information. However, we are going to discuss some really interesting topics today, like consciousness, density, ascension, and what that all means. And then we'll kind of move into discussing the seven densities of consciousness, which is what the entire episode is really about. And then we'll talk about the chakras just a little bit, though. We're not going to jump too deep into it because next week on episode 7, baby, we getting all the way into the chakras, and I'm going to teach y'all how to start progressing on an evolutionary path towards ascension, okay? But that's done through the chakra system and also the zodiacs, balancing the zodiacs. Y'all have heard me say that over the last 2 episodes. Now we're gonna finally get into the nitty gritty and start talking about how we do that, okay? So we'll talk about that. And path to ascension just means raising your vibration. That is exactly what everybody is talking about when they say raising your vibration. When you go from one density to another, again, that's what you're doing, is you're raising your vibration. Okay, so we are going to get super into the chakras, but just a brief overview, because again, next week we're going to talk about that in detail. And I'll also provide you guys some resources at the end so that you can read up on it, so that you're prepared for next week's lesson as well. Because I read this book called The Manual to Ascension, and it was great. It gave me some really good information. I could also tell that there was a little bit of opinion in it, which I like to be honest about everything that I'm reading. I think this person had a little bit of their opinion into this manual, but it does give a lot of great information that I think we need to understand. So I'll provide that at the end as well. So today we're going to start with consciousness. We need to know what consciousness is first before we can talk about the 7 densities of consciousness, right? So to be unconscious is to be in a state which the ability to be aware is something that is lost, okay? So when you are not conscious, you are not aware, okay? And that is a lot of us walking around today, believe it or not, okay? Anyways, consciousness is the awareness or the perception of something, okay? And human consciousness is the awareness of the existence of ourselves within physical reality, okay? So it's like being alert, being awake, and being able to perceive and recognize patterns in the external world, as well as experience internal sensations, emotions, and thoughts. All right, so if someone says that you are conscious, it means that you have a high level of awareness of the objective truth of our reality and internal, external, and ethereal worlds. If you are unconscious, you have a low level of awareness, not meaning that awareness is just gone altogether, but you have a low level of awareness of the objective truth of reality, internal, external, and ethereal worlds. So if consciousness is basically how fucking aware you are of what the hell is going on around you, right? Then we need to talk about density as well, okay? So density is how much mass or energy is in an amount of space. So low density is contracted, heavy, and closer together like matter. That's what we are. We are more dense, right? And high density is expanded, light, and further apart like energy. So how heavy is the light that is contained within a vibrational range is basically what density is. And density consciousness is a concept that identifies the density of energy, which defines the level of consciousness of a particular being, form, or realm within a dimension. Okay, so low density has a low vibration, frequency, and awareness, whereas high density has a high vibration, frequency, and awareness. Okay, so as you can see, density and dimensions are two different things. Although a lot of us in the spiritual community will use them interchangeably, they're not the same thing. Okay, the density is the level of consciousness within a dimension. Okay, so you can be anywhere between 1 to 7 density within the third dimension. Okay, so we'll talk about dimensions and all of that, not next episode, but probably the episode after that. We'll get into dimensions, we'll get into matrices, we'll get into grids and things like that. But for now, what you need to know is that density and a dimension are not the same thing, and density is really the more accurate thing to be using when we're talking about consciousness. Okay, so now I explained before that the path to ascension is through the 7 densities, which are related to the 7 chakras, but I didn't tell you what ascension is. Now, ascension is just the act of raising to a higher density consciousness, raising your vibration to a higher density consciousness, or a level of conscious awareness. It's a process of expansion as energy moves from dense matter to more or less dense light and energy. Okay, so this is a natural energetic process. This is not we do not get a choice, baby. That's why they talk about like the new earth, right? But we've kind of been in the 4th density since 2012. All right, so that is why the veil is lifting, right? Because, and we'll talk about that. I'll explain that to y'all later so y'all can understand like what is actually happening, right? But we've been in the 4th density since 2012, but it takes sometimes thousands, hundreds, billions of years to go to reincarnate into one density until you're able to evolve out of that density, which we'll talk about. So this is a natural process. This is not something that you get to choose. With the earth's vibration raising, you better raise with that mug or you're going to be severely sick. Now, I guess the next logical question, since I'm saying this is a natural process, you don't really get a choice. Taja, why is this happening, right? Well, this is happening because this is an expression of God consciousness, or the logos, which we talked about last episode, trying to get to know itself from different perspectives, meaning that it needs different experiences, meaning that everything in the universe, in the multiverse, because there's multiple universes. And when we talk about octaves and we talk about a universe equals an octave, right? And once you get past these 7 densities and you go into the 8th density, which is basically the first density of the next dimension, you are now in a new universe. Okay, so we live in a multiverse, and in this multiverse everything is evolving constantly so that God can explore itself, and we are a part of that process, right? And that's why once we get to the 6th density, the higher self looks back and says, hold on sis, you're lagging a little bit back there, let me help you pull up. Okay, so everything is about evolution. So it, like I said before in the last episode, it is your duty to get to know yourself on a higher level because you're helping the evolutionary process. It is your duty to help other people as well. But the caveat is that those people need to be willing to be on this journey with you. Don't try to sink your fucking boat by putting people on your boat who trying to jump ship every 5 seconds. And you gotta spread your energy out just to save all these people. They sitting here poking holes in your boat because they don't want to be there. Okay, so what I mean by like influencing the people around you, by you just working on yourself, you will start to influence people around you. By me just working on myself, I'm starting to influence people in my family, and I'm 2,000 miles away, right? But they see what's happening. They seeing me changing. They seeing the advice that I'm giving is completely different because my perspective is different. You know, so with you awakening yourself, you start to awaken the people around you, okay? So I know I just gave y'all a lot of information, so I'm just gonna give y'all a brief little overview before we hop into the densities, okay? So densities are basically levels of consciousness or existence within a dimension. There are 7 densities, but they say 8 densities because the 8th density is actually the first density of the next dimension, okay? So if you think about musical notes, right? Because the 7 densities correspond to the 7 chakras, which corresponds to the 7 colors in the rainbow, which corresponds to the 7 scale or musical notes on a scale, right? And once you get to the 8th octave, it starts the next scale, right? So it's the same thing. An octave with what Ra responds is actually a universe. Okay, so every time you get to the 8th octave, you are now in another universe because we live in a multiverse. Okay, so density is the measurement of how dense the light is vibrating at. Okay, there are 7 densities, like there are 7 chakras. We already talked about that. So the first density is beingness and awareness. Okay, it's associated with the red ray and associated with the root chakra, which is the lowest existence that you could possibly have. That's why they say stop saying I am statements all the time. I am strong, or affirmations, not statements. They say stop saying that, because again, if you constantly just focusing on I am, on that root chakra, you're in the lowest level of existence. You're concentrating on a lower vibration, the lowest vibration. Okay, so it includes all organic matter and the elementals, which is air, fire, earth, water, and the aether. Okay, so this is like rock, this is like water, this is like stuff like that. Okay, things that are not able to communicate. All right, and then these have an atomic body, and then it takes a 2 million year cycle to go through this. Okay, so before we became this, we had to go through a 2 million year cycle of being air, fire, water, earth, aether, whatever it is. Okay, before we could evolve into the second density. Now the second density is movement and growth. Okay, and it's associated with the orange ray and associated with the sacral chakra. Okay, it includes all single cell microbes, plants, and animals. And here you have a chemical body, which is what we have right now. Okay, and it takes 4.6 billion year cycle. Okay, meaning that you have to incarnate 1 to 200 years, okay, in order for you to get past this second density. So it's a very long density that we have to stay into before our consciousness can evolve past this. And again, like animals are in this density as well, plants are in this density as well. Okay, so yeah, it's a pretty long, lengthy density to be in. Now the next is the third density, and the third density is what we just evolved out of it, or still evolving out of. The third density is self-awareness and the choice. Now we're going to talk about this when we talk about the lessons that you need to learn in each one. Right now I'm just giving y'all a brief overview of what the densities are. Okay, so the third density, self-awareness and a choice, is associated with the yellow ray or the solar plexus. Okay, and this includes humans. All right, but as Ra refers to us, we are mind, body, soul complexes. All right, and I'll explain that. When I explain that later, you'll understand what I mean by that. Okay, and we have chemical bodies, right? And we have a 75,000 year cycle in the third density. Okay, incarnation looks like 30 to 900 years, okay, of reincarnating into this cycle. Okay, it includes the veil of forgetting, the choice between polarity, and is the shortest, most intense density. Okay, and the catalyst from the third density to fourth density is pain and suffering, right, for growth. And the reason why you have to go through pain and suffering is because in the second density, the ego is formed. And in order for you to have free will and not be controlled by this ego, right, or allow your ego to have the will, you have to shake free of it. And you only can do that through pain and suffering. Once you go through pain and suffering, you start to develop compassion and love, which leads you into the fourth density. Okay, so the choice that you have to make in the third density is service to self versus service to others, which we'll deep dive into in just a minute. Okay, and the reason why pain and suffering is this catalyst, and why you have to go through this veil of forgottenness, is because God wanted the choice to be authentic between, you know, service to self and service to others. You can say good and bad, or positive and negative, but there exists this polarity, and there exists a point where you have to choose which side of the polarity that you want to fulfill, right? And that all happens in the third density. And so the reason why we need to forget all of our past lives is because the choice needs to be authentic. And after experiencing this pain and suffering, you have this choice of like, you know what, I'm gonna rise above this. You know, I'm not gonna let anybody change the way that I love. I'm still gonna love harder and help people heal and all of this. And then you have this, if you can't beat them, join them type attitude, which is the service to self. Now, the service to others is typically what we would Jesus, stuttering Stanley. It's typically what we would say is the path to like angels, archangels, beings of light, right? Whereas the path to service to self is what you would say a demon is, or what we would call a demon, but a demon is not what we actually think it is. We just don't know how to protect ourselves against them, and we don't fear what we always fear what we don't understand. So I'll explain that to y'all later. But that's why we have to forget who we are, because the choice needs to be authentic. So next is the fourth density, and this is what we have been in since 2012. Okay, so fourth density is about love and understanding. It's associated with the green ray, and it is the heart chakra, right? So you have half a chemical body and half a light body in this density. It takes a cycle of 30 million years for a full evolutionary cycle, okay? And when it comes to incarnations, it could be 90,000 years spent in this density, okay? So Earth entered the fourth density again in 2012, and the full transition will take about 100 to 700 years for us to be fully into this fourth density energy, okay? The fifth density is about light and wisdom. It's associated with the blue ray and associated with the throat chakra. You are completely a light body in the fifth density, okay? Now, the fifth density is actually where a lot of our ascended masters, our spirit guides, all of that live or inhabit the fifth density, okay? And basically, you develop powerful psychic abilities in the fifth density. You learn to serve without self-sacrifice, and what that means is that martyr energy, right? And I would say that I was doing a lot of self-sacrificing when I first started my TikTok, you know, exposing occult information and stuff like that, which made me a target for some psychic attacks. So yeah, so it's learning how to stop making yourself the sacrifice for being kind to other people, okay? Whereas the fourth density is more like, be kind to everybody. And the fifth density is like, yeah, be kind to everybody, but also like safeguard your energy as well, okay? So, and you learn to balance out love and light, okay? And this is typically where like old souls come from, and like star seeds and wanderers. They call them wanderers, but wanderers are basically just star seeds, okay? And this cycle is about 50 million years. And it is an immortal incarnation, okay? So you get to decide whenever it is that you want to die up out of this density. And then the sixth density is about unity and balance. It's associated with the indigo ray, and it's the third eye, okay? Now this is actually the body that we use when we're dreaming. But its perfect balance of love and light has already been achieved in this sixth density. It is a body of pure light as well, okay? So no more chemical body, this is pure light. And then you learn lessons of forgiveness, of eternity. Service to self can't polarize a path past this sixth density, okay? So people who choose the path of service to self get to the sixth density early in the sixth density and realize that they cannot polarize past this sixth density. So a lot of them will actually concede and actually go back and start living a path of service to others, so that they can polarize, okay? So sixth density beings usually turn back as the higher self to all previous incarnations in order to keep polarizing into the seventh density, okay? Now this sixth density incarnation is a 75 million year cycle. Sorry, not incarnation, but it is a 75 million year cycle that is spent in the sixth density. And it is, again, an immortal incarnation, meaning that you get to decide when you die, when you're a sixth density being. Now, Ra referred to himself in the Law of One as a sixth density social memory complex, which just means that a bunch of sixth density or lower, it could be five density, I believe, individual souls basically merge their consciousness together to form this bigger consciousness, and that is the social memory complex, okay? And then next is the seventh density, and this is the last density. It's the gateway to eternity. It's associated with the violet ray, and it is the crown chakra. It is the light body as well, completely light body, and it's the final destiny in our octave or in our universe. So basically you become everything at this point. You release your consciousness, your individual memories, and you kind of become part of this whole, or part of the all, right? And you have no memories, no identities, no past, no future, none of that. So My podcast is named Becoming No One. Why? Because the ultimate fucking goal is to become no one, okay? Release your identity, release your memories, release your past, because that is where you are headed any fucking way, regardless of if you want to or not, because we don't get a choice. It is a natural process, okay? So the overall purpose of this entire incarnation is to become no one, okay? So the seventh density serves as a guide to the higher self, and then enters a black hole at the end of the seventh density, which we'll talk about. So basically they say like black holes that we see in the universe are actually suns or stars that have completed their full incarnation, and they have no purpose for being a physical thing anymore. So they turn into a black hole and they go within themselves, okay, which means that their cycle of life has been completed. All right, so now that we know the basic information and how long it takes to go through each density and which chakra is associated with all of that, now we can get into what are the lessons that you learn in each density, and then the purpose of us going through each density. Like, what are we trying to learn, right? And once we go through that and we talk about like the choice, I'll spend a lot of time talking about the choice section in the third density, because I think that really affects us right now. Everything else is just good to know, need to know information, okay? So first density, again, I said, is just beingness, and it's the simplest form of existence, okay? So these are the elementals, and they experience states of matter, which are solid, liquid, gas, electrons, protons, neutrons, chemical substances like oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, like all of that. Those are basically interacting with each other with no real consciousness, just, you know, that's just how it works, okay? And the whole purpose of this is just to experience a simple existence, all right? Now, the second density is where they build the vessels, okay? So this includes plants and animals, okay? And they build a vessel for consciousness to experience itself, okay? So life starts with single-celled organisms, vegetations, and animals. The first level, when consciousness starts to interact with itself and each other, okay? So to eat, to procreate, to develop a sense of space and time and separateness as well, okay? This is where the ego is also developed, all right? Because separateness is the ego. That's the whole purpose of the ego is, well, not purpose of the ego, but the ego does provide the illusion of separation, right? And there's no sense of self here though, okay? So they don't actually have like a sense of self that's developing. It does kind of towards the end when they're about to incarnate into the third density, but most of the decisions are basically based off of instinct, okay? And the whole purpose of this is to experience growth and movement and to raise a desire for the independence from the group, all right? Now, the third density, which is where we gotta spend a little time, we gotta talk, come sit down, honey. All right, so the third density is where you start gaining self-awareness and the ability to make decisions and live out those decisions, okay? So humans are here, and this is also where free will exists, okay? So you may start to live out your dualistic beliefs, and what I mean by dualistic beliefs is, do I like this? Do I dislike this? Is this right or is this wrong? Is this good or is this bad, okay? So you get this kind of contrasting polarity that's going on here, and the whole purpose of this is to learn polarity, okay? And then judgment comes about here as well, judgment of yourself and judgment of others, because you're able to conceptualize and critically think in this density, whereas you were not able to critically think before in the other densities, okay? So through critically thinking, we're able to make decisions based off of our conceptualization, okay? So the whole purpose of the third density is for us to choose either polarity. And what I mean by that is, again, that choice that I talked about, service to self or service to others. Service to self is what they consider to be like the negative choice, all right? And service to others is considered to be like the positive path. Why? Because it's easier for you to polarize with service to others, because it only takes you being 51% positive, whereas if you choose a service to self, it takes you have to polarize 95% before you can evolve into the next density, okay? So it is a painful existence to have. You will continue to go through pain and suffering, whereas the service to self, you kind of free yourself from that pain and suffering that the third density provides, because the third density, again, is associated with the solar plexus, and the solar plexus, which I tell y'all all the time, pain and suffering, all right? And the solar plexus, how you overcome the solar plexus is making conscious decisions and managing your thoughts, okay? Because your thoughts affect your reality, all right? So Excuse me. So this is where you have the ability to critically think. So the purpose of this is to choose that polarity. Now, service to self is to perform duties, actions, and behaviors for yourself as more important or higher authority than others. This is what people consider to be negative or dark path. It's the if you can't beat them, join them type of attitude. And most demons or dark entities choose this path, but it's the path of constant pain and suffering. And this path makes gains by dishonoring other people's free will, which means infringing upon other people's free will. So let me just pause for a second. We talk about predictive programming, right? We talk about conditioning and the powers that be basically putting everything in our face through movies, they actually even put everything in the laws, but they only get on the media and tell us about the parts they want us to know about, right? Because they know that we're not going to read. They make everything at our fingertips so that we don't sit down and actually take the time to sift through these things. What they're trying to do is avoid that karma, right? They're not trying to be a negative being because it's hard for you to polarize as a negative being. So if I tell them what it is, then they have their free will to choose. And because they use their free will, that's not me being a negative being. That's just me providing a service and them choosing to partake in that service. That's what's actually happening, okay? So they're still trying to polarize as positive beings, but they're doing this by using what they think is a loophole of karma. Now, as I explained before, this is harder. This is harder for them to do. The path is longer and it's slower because they skip the heart chakra because they find it to be useless. Love and compassion. Imagine that. So in order for them to polarize, it requires them to be an extreme narcissist, okay? And they have to prioritize greed and hatred. So you can never evolve past the sixth density if you choose this path, okay? But the service to others is to perform duties, actions, and behaviors for others as a more important or higher authority than the individual self, okay? So this path is the path to most beings of light, ascended masters, archangels, angels, like that, okay? And they make gains by honoring people's free will. And what do I mean by that? And I've explained this on TikTok before, but I don't think that I've ever explained this on the podcast, okay? Free will, it allows us to experience unconditional love. Now, unconditional love is not what we think it is. It's not tolerating bullshit until you can't tolerate bullshit no more and thinking that, well, I love them without any conditions. No, that's not what that means, okay? Unconditional love is allowing someone to make whatever choices it is that they want to make without your interference, okay? And what you're doing is going from a place of trying to fix people into a place of observing, okay? And you're just observing what it is that they would rather do. And now that you see what it is that they'll rather do, you get to use your free will to decide whether or not you want to partake in that or not, okay? So free will is not interfering. Let me give you an example, okay? So I have a family member who, every time I talk to this family member, I don't feel like that they're listening to me. They're always on their phone, but whenever they're talking, it's about, you know, it's important, they're engaged, but whenever I even respond to what they're saying, they're not paying attention. So instead of being like, hey, did you hear me? Hey, are you paying attention to me? I don't do that anymore. I just let them exist exactly how they want to exist, and I do not share parts of myself anymore. If you do not ask, I do not tell. Why? Because you don't care anyways. Right? And I'm not about to frustrate myself and pull myself out of alignment when I see that that is what you would rather do. So I'm not going to force anybody to do something that they don't want to do. That is what that means, okay? So if you're dating somebody and they have 10 different women on their phone and you don't agree with that and you don't think that you deserve better, right? Because you got to know that you deserve better. You don't try to tell them, I see this going on, and throw a fit and take their phone and break it and all this and still be dealing with them. For what? You know, you already know in your soul that that doesn't align with you. The only choice the choice should be easy. Does this align with me or does this not align with me? And that is what unconditional love is, okay? It's like, I love you enough to not even try to change who you are because I respect your journey and I allow you to do whatever it is you need to do in order for you to evolve right now, but I'm not going to partake in it because it is a hindrance to my evolution, okay? That is what unconditional love is, all right? So that's what this service to self is, honoring other people's free will and understanding that you don't get to choose for them. Okay, it's releasing that control. You do not get to choose for them. You can just see what they are doing and what they would rather do, and then decide whether or not that is something you want to partake in. Okay, and the catalyst in the third density, like I explained before, is the catalyst of evolution is psychological suffering. Okay, so that's contrast, meaning comparing yourself to other people, challenges, difficulties, pain and suffering, because suffering allows your consciousness to break free from the ego, which is what we talked about before. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the fourth density, okay? And this is learning to vibrate into your own highest timeline, together or as a collective, okay? And this is in the now, so that means that present moment is super important. That's why you guys need to be practicing meditation, because you need to practice how to stay in the present moment, okay? And that's through pure power of unconditional love, which I just explained to y'all, okay? So we are in the stages of doing this now on Earth. Still in the physical world, you have to add in the spiritual world though, okay? So the third density, again, very physical. Fourth density, you add into the spiritual component, which is spiritual, metaphysical, esoteric, subtle, energy side of everything. So energy is no longer doubted, but accepted as true in this level, and is an intrinsic part of existence, whether you understand it or not, okay? So the whole purpose of this is to experience one extreme of polarity and raise a desire for less polarity and more balance, okay? So it's understanding that we can't just exist with one polarity, but instead we need both of them. But we need to have balance between the two of them. That is what everything is about, balance between these polarities, okay? So you need both good and dark. You need both light and dark energy, good and bad energy, right and wrong energy, whatever you want to call it. You need both of them. And the fourth density, that's where you start to understand that. You just need to find balance in between them, okay? So this is where the veil of forgottenness starts to disappear, and we start to remember that we are infinite beings having a temporary experience. This is what people call a spiritual awakening, okay? So as we progress through this fourth density, we'll start to see more people born with the ability to remember their past lives, which is not too far-fetched if you've been listening to people on TikTok, because there's mothers on there talking about their kids are saying weird things like, I used to be your brother and I died when I went around a corner, or I used to be this kid in this little city or across the seas, right? We're starting to see that happening right now, and it's because that veil of forgottenness slowly starts to disappear in the fourth density. All right. And again, like I said before, the veil of forgottenness is needed because we need to be able to make an authentic choice between service to self and service to others. All right. The pain and suffering is how the catalyst to get us to make that choice. All right. So we're going to start seeing more people being born who can remember their past lives. And it's already started happening if you've been paying attention at all, okay? Because that veil of forgottenness is starting to disappear in this fourth density, and we've been in the fourth density since 2012. All right, so next is fifth density. Now, fifth density is learning infinite wisdom by seeing all from all perspectives on all timelines, okay? So if you've ever seen Interstellar, which is something that I love, if you been watching me on TikTok, I love freaking Interstellar. I watch it a million times a day if I could. But basically, when he gets sucked into this wormhole or this black hole, whatever it is, he's able to see across all timelines, right? And that's kind of what you can see in this fifth density. All right, so it's uniqueness and individuality exist here because it is the last density where physical matter exists. So the shift comes in when the being stops trying to be kind at its own expense. Meaning that you stop being the fucking sacrifice for being kind to other people, okay, or to your own detriment, and cares more about preserving its own essence, okay? So entities can easily transverse and mound time and space through thought and energy. It's less about relationships and more about developing an interconnection to intelligent energy. Okay, so the purpose of this is to learn separation between self and others, or the whole is an illusion and in truth. We are all and both, meaning that we're an individual, but we're also like all of everything as well, okay? And it's understanding that, we start to understand that in the fourth density. So it raises the desire for the elimination of polarity and unification of separate and the whole. We learn to be an individual and a part of the whole as well here, okay? So service to others realizes that they have to give to themselves too, okay? What about me? What about what I need? It's that type of energy, okay? So, mama need love too. So we learned that, again, we're an individual, but we're also a part of this bigger thing. All right. So polarity is moving into a place of balance and understanding. So both polarities are needed, which is what we start to understand here. And again, this is usually where our guides, our angels, and ascended masters hang out in this fifth density. All right. The sixth density is first individual beings which are working on shedding the illusion of separation and becoming pure energy to return to non-physicality, okay? Because if as we explained before, in the seventh density, you don't have to have a physical form in the seventh density, okay? You also don't have to have one in the sixth density as well, because you're pure light. However, you can choose to have a physical form if that is what you would like. So this is the move past dualism and you're able to experience every perspective of all situations, okay? So it's realizing that everything appears in your reality. Everything that appears in your reality is mirroring you. So confronting whatever negativity that you still have that exists within you, okay? And you're not bound by a physical body. You are pure light. So you can decide to have a physical appearance, or you can just be pure light. Okay, so the purpose is to experience polarity without emotions and raise a desire to return to infinite oneness, okay? So in addition, consciousness exists to impart levels of understanding and wisdom to those in the lower levels of density consciousness to help them learn and understand. This is what I talk about. This is what I'm talking about when I say that the higher self at the sixth density turns back around to the parts of itself that have not evolved, right? And help them along. Okay, so our higher self is here to help us. That's why we got to balance these chakras so that we can talk to our higher self or manifest the higher self in our physical being. Okay, so yes, our higher self is us from the future, billions and billions of years in the future. Yeah. And eventually we'll be the higher self of some lower parts of us. Okay. So, but the higher self has a higher self, which is our seventh density self, which is also the future self of the higher self, which is kind of freaking trippy and crazy. And like, yeah. Anyways, next and final is the seventh density. And seven densities are the collective souls. So you're no longer an individual in the seventh density, you're pure consciousness. And this happens when the entity decides to detach from needing to evolve, to learn and teach and just exist as it is. It has no obligations, no attachments, okay? And that's becoming no one, okay? I'm gonna say it again. Did you hear me in the back? All right, that's becoming no one. So the higher self, this is the higher self of our higher self. And the purpose is for us to let go of our individual memories, knowledge, and experiences and return back and share with the whole. You are literally everything at this stage, but it raises the desire to unknow and experience ourselves differently again, which takes us back to the start of the cycle, but from a different level of awareness, okay? So different universe, okay? So this is the path to a brand new universe right before total oneness with the creator or source is achieved. So now I hope you understand what Rob meant when he said he was a sixth density social memory complex, right? Which is just a bunch of individual consciousnesses that have decided to join together to form one entity because they have the same goal, okay? So a lot of the archangels, like Archangel Michael, Gabriel, right? Those are social memory complexes as well, all right? So I hope that brings some things full circle for y'all. So as you can see, 7 is a significant number, which we already talked about. And then I also told y'all about Ra. The only history here is that Ra visited ancient Egypt years ago to build the pyramids as healing centers, teach about crystals, tarots, and then the 7 chakras. But the information was distorted, so he decided to come back at a later time to reintroduce this information, okay? So if you had any weird feelings about tarot or about crystals or anything like that, I think it's worth us looking into, okay? And I don't say that just because I talk to my I don't talk to my higher self, but I get guidance through tarot cards. I don't do tarot for other people, but I do get guidance from tarot cards or whatever. And I think it is a good practice to have, any divination practice, which is, that's everything that he's talking about. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that with the rise of Christianity, they started to demonize all ancient practices, which included astrology, tarot, crystal use and stuff like that, but that's not what they used to practice prior to this. And there's still civilizations in Africa that still worship the sun and that still practice divination. So I think it's worth looking into for yourself if you're interested. If you're not, I'm not pressuring anybody to do anything. I'm just letting you know that this is something that has been taught for years and years and years, more years than you can probably imagine. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the chakras, and I mean a little bit about the chakras. Because next week, baby, I'm gonna give y'all what y'all need. All right. Okay, so the path to ascension is through balancing the chakras and the 12 zodiacs inside of yourself. So understanding your birth chart, getting your time of birth, doing your birth chart, okay? Understanding how to balance the water crisis, air crisis, earth crisis, fire crisis, which I already did an episode on, guys, right? To prepare us for this moment. Learning how to do that, okay? So studying astrology and your chakra system is single-handedly some of the most important thing that you could do for yourself. Okay, so do the work, guys. Do the work. So next week we're going to dig deep into the chakra system. But what you need to know right now is that the top 3 chakras have to do with the mental body. The heart chakra has to do with the emotional body or the soul. So when he said mind, body, soul, this is what he's talking about. The top 3 chakras is the mind. The heart chakra is the soul, and the body is the bottom 3 chakras, which are the physical body, your survival instincts, physicality, 3D, masculine energy, right? Where the top 3 are the feminine energy. All right, so in order for us to ascend, we have to get all of these into perfect balance, which requires steps called initiations, which we'll talk about next week when I talk about this manual to ascension that really low-key changed my life. But I wasn't ready for it when I first read it, so I'm bringing it back because we all need to know this. And according to Ra, again, we are considered the body, mind, soul complex. And if you think about what I just said with the mental body, mind, body, soul, that is actually really accurate. And what you'll notice too, if you listen to any channel readings, is that these beings use specific words that are super, super accurate to what we actually are. So it's just really interesting information to dig into, okay? So we have 7 different bodies that correspond with these chakra systems, right? And when we're dreaming, we take that indigo ray body with us, which is our pineal gland, which is our third eye chakra. And then what's laying in our bed is the chemical body. The physical body is still in the bed, right? That's why our consciousness can travel, right? Because our mind is just an entity without a body. All right, so our mind is all the intelligence that we are. All right, that's why we take the mind body with us, because after we pass on, the mind lives on. Now it's time for conspiracy theorists say what? And I just want to say that these are conspiracies for the purposes of not being deemed as misinformation, okay? So Jesus was apparently a 4th density being in a 3rd dimensional body. Apparently he was speaking in John. When he was speaking in John, he was actually speaking from the perspective of somebody who had manifested his higher self in the physical form. So when he said Father, he was speaking about his higher self, because we are the projected fragment of the higher self, created by the higher self to experience the physical world, okay? So Father, you get it? Okay, anyways. In addition, Martin Luther King and Mother Teresa were also 4th density beings as well. Now we did have 5 density beings who came into this 3rd dimension, and those are gonna be Buddha, and any masters or sages. Now the way that you can tell that somebody or some being is a 5th dimensional is because they spend a lot more time working on their inner being, okay? So these are people who spend a lot of time meditating, monks and things like that. They spend a lot of time on their inner world because they don't have to interact with the physicality of this world. They're just here to share their wisdom with us, okay? So a lot of starseeds and a lot of wanderers come from the 5th density, okay? And only 8 to 10% of them actually wake up to the fact that they're starseeds and wanderers, okay? But now, since these channel readings started in the 1980s, I think it was 65 million starseed incarnations at that time, and now it's upwards of 95 million. That is directly from what the Law of One is saying, or the not Law of One, what Aaron Abke is saying about the Law of One. Okay, so a lot of us are star seeds, but a lot of us are not awakened to the fact that we're star seeds. Okay, which and also too, I want to say this as well, because I see this a lot on TikTok, so I just want to mention this. There are people who are like, oh, I'm not from this planet and blah blah, but what you need to understand is that if you incarnated into this existence, you are supposed to be having this existence. You talking about you not being from this planet, or you not fitting in here, right? And you staying focused on that, that just creates separation, okay? And that's just you living in your ego again. If you're incarnated into this existence as a human being, you're supposed to be having a human experience. And that is what you need to focus on, is evolving in your human experience, not being a star seed and, letting everybody who you come by know that, oh, I'm a star seed and I'm not from here and that's why I can't fit in. And like, you're literally perpetuating a cycle that you literally came here to break. So make sure that if you're one of those people, that you realize that you have a human incarnation for a reason. And the next episode is really going to help you figure out how to ascend, with this body that we have. Okay. So also another tidbit, and this part is the conspiracy part, I guess you could say. Reptilians are actually fourth density negative beings. And by reptilian, I mean people who are living out of their reptilian brain, okay? Because there's 3 sections of our brain. The very middle part is the reptilian portion. The reptilian portion is the very low vibrational part of us, and it's the bottom 3 chakras. So if you're living out of that reptilian brain, meaning that you're on that path to service to self, narcissism, greed, hatred, right? That's living out of the reptilian brain. Yeah. You might wanna listen to next week's episode. But yeah, so reptilians that are, the powers that be, that's why they're calling them reptilians. And that's why in a lot of comedies they use satire and they use like lizard people, but reptilians don't have to be lizard people. Okay, they could be you and me. Okay, and you know how they say, Kevin Gates did an interview, y'all, and he was like, them demons is not what y'all think they are. Them demons is the people y'all laying next to, the people y'all hanging out with, and da-da-da-da. Yeah, the reason why he's saying that is because demons are just beings like you and me who decided to take the path to service to self, okay? And they were able to incarnate up to the 6th density. So some of them may be a higher density than we are, right? And some of them may, and because they're a higher density, say that you have a 5th density demon or an entity that has chosen this path to service to self, right? And if you have a 5th density one, they are able to scan your body and see where your weaknesses are, and they just play off those weaknesses. And because they know that you can't protect yourself, you fear it. They know that you're going to be in fear because that's what you've been taught through religion, right? So the best thing that you can ever do for a demon is to give them love and compassion. Why? Because it is hard for them to polarize. They have to be 95% negative. There is not a negative entity that is going to sit there and allow you to give them love and light, because you are actually working to their detriment. A lot of them will just go away. But if you sit there and try to exorcise the demon, you're just feeding into it because you're doing it from a place of fear. So if you operate from a place of love and just compassion for this entity and realize that they are in a constant cycle of pain and suffering because they chose a path that requires them to be in mental torment all the time, and you just send love and compassion, they will go away. Just a little tidbit, I do accept tips. No, I'm just playing. And then finally, resources. There's the Complete Ascension Manual, How to Achieve Ascension in This Lifetime by Joshua David Stone. And then the Complete Ascension Workbook by the Earth Mother. Now, the Earth Mother Workbook, I got this off of Scribd. I told y'all about Scribd before, but it's scribd.com. It's $20 a month for the subscription. But again, you can download most of this stuff. So if you want to get it for a month and cancel it, that ain't none of my business. But what I'm saying is this has probably been one of the most informative sites that I've ever had. I've had an account for 4 or 5 years now. It has so many books. It has hidden occult knowledge. It has so much stuff on here. So I highly suggest, and no, I'm not sponsored by them, or I don't sponsor them, but I mean, I damn near do. So Scribd, holler at me. I love y'all deep. This is the end of the episode. I can't wait to talk to y'all next week about the chakra system so we can figure out what we need to do to start to handle this issue. Thank you for bearing with me, and I love y'all deep. Happy healing, people.